Catfish Willie. Just because it sounds bayou. It's Blind Willie Johnson.
Oh, yeah. Blind. He was blind?
Mm-hmm. He's blind.
Why is he so growly? Is he
That's
always like that?
What's that song he does? But if it would not have been for Jesus. For he has fully saved me, and he washed my sins away. Blind Willie Johnson. Who's that writing? John the Revelator. Who's that writing? John the Revelator. Who's that writing? John the Revelator. Book of the Seven Seals. All right. Well, James Brown at the Denver Coliseum, forgot what year it was, but it was probably 1967. He was on, can't remember if there was a warm-up band or not, but we already knew that he was the hardest working man in entertainment. And he was in his prime at that time. We knew that. We had my friend, his mom worked at a radio station, so we were pretty up to date on music, and we really liked James Brown, and she could get us free tickets to just about any concert. We went down, he and I, to the Denver Coliseum and saw James Brown there. I'm sure we're the only white people there, and that I'm just mentioning because that's what it was, and we got looked at quite a bit, but it was cool. It was cool. Everybody was glad we were there, I guess. I don't know. Nobody said nothing to us, but we thoroughly enjoyed the concert. We were, at that time, mesmerized by certain people on the stage, and he was one of them. He really caught your attention. He had a style that was unique. Nobody was like James Brown, and being that old that I am, I really saw the influence that he had on Michael Jackson, probably more than anybody else. Nobody turned and spun and danced like James Brown at that time. And of course, he sang like nobody else. A lot of folks don't know that he really was a manager over that band. They really couldn't play any wrong notes or do any ad-libbing. It had to be exactly the way that he wanted it. And those songs came across a lot like they did on the record because he did them that way time and time again, and he sung them that way too. Probably the only thing that really was off of script, so to speak, was toward the end. He always had this thing where you couldn't get him off the stage. You know, he's the hardest man in show business, and he's there to sing. He's there to work, and you couldn't get him off the stage. And so part of his entourage would come, and they'd put his coat on him, like, it's time to go now, James. And he would go back, you know, and James Brown, everyone, James Brown. And everybody'd be applauding, and he'd get halfway off the stage, throw off the coat, and come back and get the mic again and start singing. And he did that like 4 or 5 times. And it was just part of it because they'd bring out a different code every time. So I say it wasn't scripted, but it was so entertaining, just that whole deal. And of course, it was all about him. And it was fun, just fun. I talked to people who went to see Michael Jackson concerts subsequently. I never got to see Michael, but they say he was that kind of showman, just totally on stage doing everything he could to be seen and heard correctly. So it was really entertaining. That's James Brown. Led Zeppelin. we saw the first concert of Zeppelin, to my understanding, in the United States. Led Zeppelin, we knew who they were because, like I say, we're pretty musically savvy. This was, I believe, 1968. And Led Zeppelin was not known to anybody, but we knew who Jimmy Page was because of his history in the Yardbirds, and just that he'd already grown quite a reputation as a guitar player. And we pretty much came to see his new band, and he was the opening act. Led Zeppelin was the opening act for Vanilla Fudge and a band called Spirit, who nobody's probably ever heard of anymore. And those bands knew who Led Zeppelin was too, because they were in the front row watching. The people in those bands were watching them play the opening set. And it was at the venue that doesn't exist now, the Denver Auditorium Theater, or Denver Auditorium Arena, I should say. And that was pretty electric, mostly for us, because nobody knew of them, but we did, as Damon and I, my brother. And there's some bands that you go to and you've never heard of anything like that come out of an amplifier. James Brown, yes, was one like that, or his music. And Led Zeppelin definitely was. Nobody had ever heard anything like that. The audience immediately liked it, and they just turned the whole concert upside down. It was like totally anticlimactic after they performed. And it was a lot of their first time hits. They probably performed most of their first album. And it's my understanding that that was a warm-up concert for their USA debut, what was supposed to be their USA debut in LA. And they played out there. I think Robert Plant must have been 17, 18 years old, but they were totally exciting to watch. And Led Zeppelin is Led Zeppelin. I don't know my favorite concert ever. I really don't, because I like so many venues of music. It would almost have to be my favorite concert in every venue. But as far as rock and roll, favorite concert was November of 1969, the Rolling Stones at Moby Gym in Fort Collins. Again, that was an opening concert tour set for their, what they call now the Altamont tour. That's a famous tour that they had in 1969 in which they made the fatal decision of having the Hells Angels fill in part way as some of the security, and it backfired on them. And we got to see them before the Altamont concert. Altamont's a speedway in California, and that was probably the best, that concert there. They opened with Terry Reid, a guy nobody's probably ever heard of, but along with them in their entourage was B.B. King. Also, a lot of people had never heard of B.B. King, but of course we had. And he turned in a great set, and just the Stones came on, did their hits that they had sent up to 1969, which is, by then they had quite a collection, and no encore, there was a standing ovation, of course, and everybody wanted them to come out, everybody expected it. They did not come out at all, just did their set, took off. A friend of mine later who rode up there with us, who didn't get in the concert, saw Mick Jagger just leaving the building and just hopping into a limo, just like, okay, we're done, we're out of here. Kind of that. But they were totally on while they were on the stage. And yeah, I'd say that was my favorite rock concert.
Did you go to Red Rocks? How about a Red Rocks concert? Did you ever see the Beatles? You didn't, did you?
Didn't see the Beatles, didn't see the Stones at Red Rocks. Probably the biggest concert I saw at Red Rocks was Jimi Hendrix. That was a long concert, and he did good there. He did very well. That was probably between his first album, Are You Experienced, and his second album, Acts as Bold as Love. I think it was. Maybe he had his other album out by then. I think that was a 1968 concert, Summer of. And there were several warm-up bands. They had trouble with the sound. But when Jimmy got up there, he just turned in a real good set. Performers, I just think, had a very arrogant attitude at that time. And I don't know if it was so arrogant, if they even thought about it, if they were being that, but they came off to me that way because there's really kind of a self-absorption in that time and frame with a lot of musicians, a lot of acts, and he was kind of one of them. He was just totally into his music at that time, and I don't know how many other performers could get together, could make it a positive thing for when he's done. He just has his guitar and he just throws it down and walks off stage. Doesn't put it on the stand, doesn't throw it out classy into the audience or do any of that. Just done with the song. There's the applause. He waves and just throws his guitar down and walks off. So that was Red Rocks, Jimi Hendrix. Yeah, we saw quite a few concerts there. I remember Peter, Paul, and Mary just about as well there and enjoyed them quite a bit. Peter, Paul, and Mary were at the tail end of their really being popular. I think that was 68 or 9. And of course everybody was going after more pumped up music by then, and here they were, the folk era, and definitely part of the civil rights movement. So that made them a little bit unpopular in a few ways, but they gave a real solid show, and they remain one of my favorites. Just Peter, Paul, and Mary just singing, because anytime you've got some people who can just get up there and do their thing with a guitar, maybe another guitar or a bass, and just singing, and they don't need anything else, and that's them. I've got a lot of appreciation for that, and that's what they did, and they just had the audience in the palm of their hand.